So Ali Rogan is founder and director of Hornsey Consulting, and Ali has been living and breathing the changing healthcare, housing and technology landscape for over a decade and keeps a close eye on what is happening across the market and politically, nationally, regionally, but importantly, how this is affecting the day-to-day challenges of older people and those with long-term needs. Thank you, Ali.
And thanks for inviting me along today to this session on top 10 tech, although I'm going to offer you true value for money and give you a lot more than 10 if I can fit it in time. So a bit of background: after 14 years as group marketing director for the leading technology enabled care provider at the time, I set up Hornsey Consulting in 2016, and my work is solely focused on health, housing, social care and technology. I've been a member of the Dementia Housing Working Group for, I think, about 10 years, Vanessa. It's been a long time. Previously, I was Vice Chair of Tech UK's Health and Care Council and a member of their Internet of Things Council. And I'm currently sitting on the Prime Minister's Dementia Challenge Group 2025, being a member since its formation. And we are currently actually working through the next steps on the dementia-friendly technology work that we want to do, which will touch on, I'm sure, responding to the post-COVID world and social prescribing. So if I use any tech terminology or acronyms that people aren't familiar with, please let me know, won't you? Now, the inquiry by the APPG has just come out this morning, and I've been busy all morning, so I haven't read it, but I'm really pleased to see that there's 52 mentions of technology, and I'll have a good look at it later. But I'm sure some of you will have already had a look at it. Looking forward to hearing what it says. So what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to touch on some of the learning from the work that I've done with the Alzheimer's Society and the Dementia Champions Group on the charter. And I'm also going to cover off some of my favourite tech for today's webinar. So a little bit of a recap. As chair of the Alzheimer's Society's Dementia Friendly Technology Task and Finish group, we successfully pulled together a network of over 30 organisations, also importantly, people living with dementia and their families, to understand the benefits of a wide range of technology to support their care and well-being. We spent a bit of time developing the charter, and have also written individual guides aimed at specific audiences, if that's of any interest to people. And we gathered a unique set of knowledge from a diverse range of organisations. The aims of the charter, as you can see on the slide, is to enable every person with dementia to have the opportunity to benefit from technology appropriate to their needs and wishes, and to outline the best practice for organisations delivering those services. So as I mentioned, we had unprecedented access to people living with dementia, and I've got lots of stories to tell you, but I'm conscious of the time. I'll tell you a couple. So I rock up at the groups and say something random like, so how is technology helping you with your everyday world? And they'd look at me as if I was mad and say, what? We aren't using technology. But then when I delved a little bit deeper, I saw one chap, for example, with a mobile phone, which was nicely nestled in his cap, just to the side of me. And I said, well, what about your mobile phone? What do you use that for? And he went, to phone people. I said, okay, I deserve that. But it turns out he uses it quite a lot when he's out and about, because he tends to, him and his wife would go out shopping together, and he would desperately fight, sometimes lose each other. So that was really helpful. And another lady told me about one day she burnt her toast, and then the fire brigade just turned up. She didn't know how, but she was very grateful that they did. And that, of course, would be a result of her smoke detector being linked to the monitoring centre. And one of the most powerful stories was actually from the fire brigade, who would go to, once went to a flat, which was after a fire, unfortunately, with very bad results. And they would see footsteps on the charcoal floor, which were going backwards and forwards to the door. And they wanted to know why this particular lady hadn't left her flat as it was, as she was in great danger. And it was because her daughter had put a sign on the inside of her door saying, please don't leave the house without me. And of course, it just brings you to tears to think about that. So technology has an enormous role to play, not just for you know, look, there's lots of different reasons for it, but in this case, it would have saved a life. But we've got to be mindful of the terminology that we use. And I noticed just very quickly from the APPG document, they've used all sorts of terminology, assisted living technologies, dementia-enabled support, technology-enabled support, etc. So using technology and terminology is absolutely key to make sure it's normalized and part of everyday life. And I'm very cognizant that the fact that everybody is different. Some people will see technology as intrusive, others will see it as another way to stay independent. And as you can see on the screen, lots of people absolutely can see some areas where it would help them. So the 3 themes that came out were safer walking, medication management, and sensors for independence. But there are some key practical questions to consider, which I'll come to at the end. So when it comes to smart home devices, I think you first have to think about the problem you want to solve. The best devices are those that serve a purpose. And now we've reached a point that no matter the problem, there's most likely to be a smart product to fix it. However, when you think about where you will find some information about it, if you search on the NHS apps library, for example, and put in dementia, there's only 2 that show up. One's the House of Memories app, which is fantastic. And I think it's had about 35,000 downloads. And the other is something called Talk Around It Home, which is a speech and language therapy app. So it's not specifically for dementia. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take you through some different categories of technology. I always used to say that there are 4 categories of technology. One is for safety, one is for health reasons, one is for enhancing and well-being, and the 4th is for connecting people. But I opted to structure this talk loosely around these categories, but absolutely know that not one size fits all. So let's start with before diagnosis and early support. So here in each section, I list a few pieces of ideas for technology and some links, and then I do a deep dive on a few of them. So depending on time, I'll do a deep dive on, in this case, 4. So the first one is sleep. So some of you may have used this app. It's called Sleepio. I thought I'd give it a whirl last year when I was having trouble sleeping. And it's an online sleep improvement program. It's clinically proven to help you fall asleep, so it says, but I had a few issues with it, to be fair. It actually consists of 6 20-minute sessions. And after the completion of one session, the next session is made available for you. So you really have to be committed. It takes a long time, and you have to write down what time you go to bed, what time you get up, how many times you've woken up. So I would imagine, well, it certainly wasn't for me, and it might not be for everybody, that particular one. The next one is just one example of sensor-driven technology. We've been talking about sensor-driven technology for years. And, 10 years ago, we were talking about 1.7 million telecare users, and the same stat is being used today. So this is just one example. This is called House. And this one gathers information about a person's routine and activity levels, which are then sent to an app. So in effect, it's treated like an early warning system. So what happens if somebody hasn't got up at a particular time or turned the kettle on, etc. It's pretty cost effective, 200 quid, and it's about 9 quid a month. There's no minimum contract. So it might well solve a problem that you want to solve for yourself and your loved ones. And it comes in a nifty little pack with one motion sensor, one plug, one door sensor, and a gateway hub. So that's pretty useful for some people, I would suggest. The next bit is the Ring doorbell. Again, this isn't new, but I tell you what, just recently I've been noticing a heck of a lot of TV ads over the last few months that are selling this particular product. So we thank them actually for raising awareness of useful tech. And it ranges in price from 89 quid up to a lot more than that. And you can, because my questions, obvious questions, I guess, are what happens if there's somebody at your door and you're not in? What do you do about it? And what if your Wi-Fi goes down? There is all these backups are available for £8 a month. And so very useful if you're worried about the security of a loved one. My last one in this section is brain training. So potentially you'll be familiar with these types of apps. The one here is called MindMate, which gives you a daily activities plan. And the one on the right, Luminosity, is the #1 brain training app, which claims to improve memory, increase focus, and feel sharper. It's been around for 10 years and it's got 100 million users. So maybe worth giving it a whirl. So my next section is after diagnosis, a little bit of help. And you'll see there's about 10 ideas just on this single slide, which of course I won't have time to go through. But I'll focus in on about 5 or less if I get time. So the first section is dementia products, and some of these you'll be very familiar with. The dual display digital clock, which is 45 quid. Signage, obviously incredibly important to aid orientation. Jigsaw's really useful. The Flipper big button remote control, what a great product. Obviously just focuses in on channel, volume, and on off. And even more simple is the 1 button radio there on the right, which is 48 quid. But it's solid, it's wooden retro design, and it enables you to set the frequency, the tuning in, and the volume. So it's just 1 button on off. Here we just really come back to the talk that we've just heard from. Brilliant talk from Jill and Sarah about ethical considerations for trackers. Fantastic slides and content there, particularly like the Frida principles. But you know, it is a problem that up to 60% of individuals will face at some point in their lives, wondering, that is, and potentially getting lost. So the middle product there is called Proximity. It's really simple. It's magnetic, it clips to clothing, and it's got 6 months battery life, so you don't need to worry about charging it. And how it works is if your loved one wanders away from you, and it's up to 20 meters, after 20 meters, you will get a little warning on your mobile phone, and hopefully you'll be able to sort it out. So it's pretty cheap, but I have noticed that it is sold out at 35 quid. The one on the left is a GPS tracking watch called Guardian, which I won't go into any details because it's been covered previously, but there's things you really have to consider. The ones I've been used to looking at in the past have been really bulky, perhaps too big for smaller wrists like myself. And you've got to ask yourself how long the charge lasts. How will you remember to charge it? Is it easy to charge? Will you remember to wear it? Is it waterproof? Will it work in those, rural areas with particularly difficult signal? So lots of things to think about. And then on the right, you'll see the Smart Soul, great name, really expensive, but it could prove to be brilliant for people. But you do have to remember to charge it, and slipping it in and out of the shoe looks fairly simple, but I'm not sure if it is. And it checks the wearer's location every 10 minutes. So, however, some people can go a long way in 10 minutes. So lots of things to think about there. Our next section then is help in a crisis. I've got a few slides here to cover things like Reminiscence. So if we take the next slide, this is The Way Back. It's a virtual reality film series, and they did some great co-production work in the early days. Their first film is of the 1953 coronation, and all of the food and drink on the table comes from memory sessions, and there's happy recollections about fish paste sandwiches and jelly and ice cream and pilchards and Mackeson's stout. And apparently someone sang them a selection of skipping songs, and these two can be seen in the final film. It's a low-cost way to entertain and engage through multi-dimensional film. It really, really is great. It rouses curiosity, enjoyment. I love it. But, some people will be put off by the virtual reality reader. But as you can see, the picture of it is cardboard. It's really low tech, actually, and it's a bit like a pair of binoculars. So seeing is believing. I really do urge you to have a look at that. Our next slide is 2 things on here. One is called Memoir, which is filled with 1950s and 60s advertising collections, pretty cheap.
I like it that you can play it from a laptop in the community room, in a home, or on tablets beside the bedside, and it's got a hard copy quiz. Memory tracks on the right there is about song task association. I think it's about $7.99. So let's see, the next slide is on more complex needs, and you'll see some links, really good links there: music, visual and auditory stimulation, and online communication tools. I'm going to briefly mention this. This is called the Cradle. It's a Dutch production, which is an interactive care tool. It's really quite strange if you look at the video. It makes noises, it vibrates. It's really fascinating. So I'm not sure if it's available in the UK, but it's worth a little look if you're interested to see what it does. Music therapy. Obviously, music and sound are one of the first senses that we become aware of as babies in the womb, and it's been said that we will maintain these in the latter part of our lives. So great stuff here, really simple. Garden Days is carefully curated sounds of the garden, £6 for the CD. Sounds nostalgic, radio theme tunes from the 40s and 50s. It's for £18 for 30 tunes. And then music for dementia, a great link there, which I probably haven't got time to talk to you about. And then our final example is the BBC Reminiscence archive. Fantastic, this. It's all for free. You just select a theme as like a sport or an event or a decade, 30s, 40s, etc. And you can choose whether you want to look at an image, an audio clip, or a video. So it's really worth a look if that's what you're interested in. So what about the future? Just checking my watch. So what about the future? Researchers and scientists have been exploring ways to utilize robotics to aid in the care of older adults for a while now, at least 6 to 8 years. And specifically, you may have seen the Paro, which is a baby harp seal robot, which was designed as a pet therapy. And recent study identified 23 different robots now, companion or assistive robots. And you may be familiar with perhaps the Pepper. Pepper is the world's first child-sized social humanoid, which is able to recognize faces and basic human emotion. And it's used on Southend-on-Sea Borough Council. And on the right, you see homes of the future. And it's not a new slide, this, but a lot of this stuff is quite futuristic. So there's a holographic touch table, a smart mirror, which allows you to shop virtually, a fall detection floor, eco-fire line, active chairs. Again, I haven't got time to go into these. And then I was reading the other day about an Aladdin lamp. That's a smart lamp that hangs on the wall and anticipates and prevents falls. So there's a lot of interesting tech out there. However, there's a lot of things to consider. I've just put a few on the slide here. You know, does it meet the need, and how will it meet the need over time as you may have changing circumstances? What if the individual has other conditions such as poor sight and hearing? And how does it work? Who's going to show me how it works? Are the instructions easy? Do I need a phone line and internet connection? What if it breaks? What do I do? You know, how do I charge the batteries? Loads and loads of questions I can think of, but we haven't got that much time. But I can certainly help if anybody has questions later. And then in terms of direction of travel, I couldn't really finish without mentioning COVID. COVID has accelerated digital tech in some aspects of healthcare by 10 years. So we're at the point of 99% of GPs and 77% of trusts have the ability to do video consultations. Not sure they all do it, but they certainly have the ability. And we've got data sharing agreements and online assessments, which are bringing down the ability to access healthcare from professionals from a year, potentially, to 24 hours virtually. And there's been a 30% reduction in outpatient appointments. We know the NHS website is one of the biggest health-related websites in the world, and usually they attract 950,000 visits a day. But the day after lockdown, there were 3 million hits. So we know there's this desperate need for information. But where do we go to get it? And we also have to be mindful that there are 9 million people who struggle to use the internet without help, and indeed 7 million households without internet access. So
there's a great proportion of people there. And whilst COVID didn't create inequalities, it has certainly shone a light on some huge gaps in inequalities. Just checking the watch. I think it's my last slide. Yes, it is. So where do you go for good advice and support on apps? If I search on Google dementia apps, the first thing that comes up is a blog from 2016 from a UK mobility company. I get a little bit better when I search for carers apps. So then I have to then search on the problem I'm seeking to solve, and then I can eventually find some information. But, we want to make it easier. And if we think about the original aims of the Dementia Friendly Technology Charter, to enable every person with dementia to have the ability to benefit from technology appropriate to their needs, I'm afraid it hasn't been achieved. So let's not get blinded by shiny new gadgets at the expense of what matters for people, and particularly people living with dementia. I better stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you. That was really informative. Thank you. Could I just ask the other panel members just to quickly turn their videos on? We haven't got much time, but there's one occurring theme that's been in the chat box. I've been put in the chat box by Bally, Francis, and Ravinda, and this relates to the growing need for resources, apps, etc., to be multicultural. So a risk that they're too culturally specific at the moment, and with a growing proportion of people from Black and minority ethnic communities having dementia, a real kind of, I guess, a lack of provision for them at the moment. Do the panelists have any comments related to that?
Well, I was just thinking about House of Memories, because I know that they are sort of forming kind of connections and also doing some joint work with other parts of the world in an attempt to make their content more culturally diverse, really, for My House of Memories, for that very issue, really.
Yeah, and I know it's an area that David Trussell, for those people who know him, has been doing a lot of work on, and obviously needs a lot of attention. A couple of comments as well. Matthew says there are two general rules about AT. The lowest level of technology should be used to meet needs, and can you buy it in Argos? And other shops are available. And I suppose that relates to your kind of closing comments, Ali, about don't be attracted to all those shiny new gadgets that just may not be appropriate.
Yeah, I think people can spend a lot of money on the wrong kind of things, and it comes back to that point between matching the kind of retained abilities that somebody has to the right solution for them. And sometimes you need a little bit of help from that. It might be an OT, or sort of, I would say that, I suppose, but that's kind of OT's core skills, really, isn't it? To look at the how the person is and match the right solution to them. So it does have to be personalised.
Thank you.
I agree. And there are a lot of online shops that you could easily spend a lot of money on, as you say, but it's getting that expert help potentially when you need it.
Thank you. And a comment from Sandy around the Reminiscence resources for people who are younger, so again, more diversity. So she's in the 60s, and her era would be the late 60s and 70s, and some people are younger. So I don't know if panelists have any observations about that.
I mean, I think it comes back to what we've been saying all the way through, which is that all of this needs to be individualised, doesn't it? There is no point in just sticking one set of music on for kind of everyone, because even if you're of the same age group, you might not like the same music. So there is something around having a whole range of things, isn't there? And actually how we tap more into, not everything has to be dementia specific when we think about Reminiscence, because we all do bits of Reminiscence. We all like to look back on things. I love to get like my old photos out and have a look through them and see, and I think there's something, isn't there, around just accessing and being really creative with the resources we use. The internet's a great wealth for that. If we're working with someone who lived in a particular area, dead easy these days to Google it and find loads of information, isn't it, to share that. So I think it is that individualized kind of approach to Reminiscence as well as to everything else, isn't it?
And I guess it's not making assumptions about everybody's going to like this kind of music, really. Like Playlists for Life and things like that is personalised, isn't it? You can populate it yourself, and so then it's more likely to be pertinent to the individual.
Absolutely. And just one final question to keep us to time. We always need more time, don't we, for these discussions? So Zoe earlier, she raised the point that she's interested in the use of technology to help people remain independent. Is there anywhere you could recommend to go to see what technology is available and how to keep up to date with that as well?
I've got quite a long list of links and things that I can make available for people if they want it.
I think that would be helpful, thank you. So we don't have any more questions. I don't know if there's one final comment from each of the panelists, sort of a final remark you'd like people to take away with them.
Stunned silence.
I think that whole thing about it being individual to the person-centered, etc., is just fundamental, isn't it? And don't get sidetracked by the bright, shiny things. So, okay, well,
yeah, sorry, I was just thinking the NHS white paper that came out last week. I don't know if it's worth a mention. A very quick mention, perhaps, or not.
Yeah. Okay.
There is the legislative proposals which are all about looking at giving the emphasis on ICSs, and what that means, of course, is we might end up having the role of this, I don't know, the third sector, independent sector, etc., might be diminished, and it's really important to make sure that we keep banging the drum for all of those amazing community groups out there who are providing lots of help and support. And I know that there's some priorities for digital transformation in the areas of some cardiology, musculoskeletal and orthopedic care pathways. But dementia hasn't got any of the focus that it should have. So let's hope somebody bangs the drum for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could just take this opportunity then to remind you of the 2 happy hours that are going to be undertaken by Housing Lynn to further speak about the APPG inquiry that was launched today. So the 22nd of April and the 13th of May. And you can book those on the Housing Lynn website. I actually don't work for Housing Lynn, but I think they'll be really informative, and they're really keen on being the secretariat of that inquiry, that actually it's not just put on the shelf and to collect dust. And I think, in all of our fields, it's really useful that that's actually actioned. So on behalf of the Housing and Dementia Working Group and Foundations, I'd like to say thank you to all our panellists today. It's been a really, really interesting session. So thank you all very much for your time. Thank you.